Hello, I'm Rhiannon. Welcome. Today I'm going to review Maggie O'Farrell's Hamlet. Here it is, gorgeous in blue and gold. So first off, what on earth is the publishing industry thinking? On the one hand, it's telling writers like us that what they want is uplit, i.e. uplifting, cheerful stories. On the other hand, in the middle of a global pandemic, what do they produce but a historical fiction about a little boy who dies of bubonic plague? Anyway, it didn't do the book much harm because it went on to win the Women's Prize for Fiction 2020 here in the UK, and I'm reviewing it. So who was Hamnet? If I say Hamlet, that might give you a bit of a clue and lead you to William Shakespeare. The book is, as I said, women's historical fiction, and it's about William Shakespeare's family. It's not, and Maggie O'Farrell's very clear about this, about William Shakespeare himself. So if you're wanting to read it and get enlightenment into the mind of the great playwright, you won't find that in this novel. It's set around his family, particularly the women in his family, and the death of the child, Hamnet, from plague, and how that impacts on the family as a whole, and eventually on his work. The book is a superb piece of historical fiction. It's vividly imagined and very, very cleverly structured, and I'll say a little bit more about that. First of all, what I loved about the book. For me, the thing that fascinated me was the character of Shakespeare's wife, who we tend to call Anne Hathaway, but in the book, for historical reasons, I suspect, Maggie calls her Agnes, or Agnes, Agnes. She's a very interesting character, and she's been done before in various manifestations and subject to a lot of almost academic speculation. What we know from the historical record, and here comes the kind of controversy or the scandal, if you like, is that she was quite a bit older than William Shakespeare when they married. He was, I think, just 18, so required a special license for the marriage. And here comes the scandalous bit, Agnes was 3 months pregnant when she married William. So we know that from the historical record. Lots of people have speculated and written about Anne Hathaway. You can imagine that she was the kind of woman who seduced the young lad and all the rest of it. Well, Maggie O'Farrell doesn't go that way with the character, and that was what was interesting to me. She makes Agnes into a kind of mystic, a healer, almost a sprite. For example, Agnes runs off to the woods to have her first child because that's where she feels at home. People are coming to the house all the time for medicines and cures. I really enjoyed the way she tied the character of Agnes to the natural world. The moment when I got hooked into the book was not at all the first chapter about the little boy. That didn't do it for me at all, no, no, no. The moment that hooked me was the moment where, in the second chapter, where Agnes goes back to her maternal home because the bees are swarming. And there is a very ominously described scene about the clouds and the bees and how she's trying to call the bees back. Unbeknown to her at the time, her children are falling ill with the plague. So that to me was very interesting, and the way that she spun the character of Agnes Hathaway. Now, I know the book's won a prize and it is a great book and I would recommend that you read it. However, I did have some issues with the way it was written, stylistic issues, and I appreciate that these are probably subjective and they might not bother other people, but they did bother me. Maggie O'Farrell's style was very rich but very repetitive. She uses a lot of adjectives. Writers know about the rule of three, but O'Farrell seemed to have to use 3 adjectives all the time, and I found myself craving a bit of simplicity. Could she just choose one and use it appropriately? I know what she was trying to do. She was trying to recreate the richness of their life and the detail of their life. But there were so many adjectives and so many lists at times. I felt it was a bit overdone, and I was feeling as if I was reading Balzac. She also had a tendency to use a repetitive structure with various sentences. So, for example, he thought, he thought, he thought. And I felt that was overused to the point where towards the middle of the book, there is a beautifully described scene, very poignant, where they are burying the child who's died. And yes, as the mother is in the graveyard, and it comes to the point where she has to leave the child in the ground, and she just can't bear to do it. And Farrell uses this structure. She couldn't, and it's heartbreaking. But by that stage, I felt that she had used this structure so often that it was very limp, so it fell flat for me. But again, these are just my opinions, so you take them or leave them. I do want to say a little bit about the structure of the novel, which as a writer myself I found very, very interesting, and I would recommend it to you if you write historical fiction. Technically, it's very, very clever. The first 2/3 of the book are a split timeline that alternating chapters between the days when the children fall sick and the death of the children, flashing back to the courtship and the meetings between Agnes and William and how they got married and their early married life. And that works very well. The last third of the book is really how they come to terms with the death of the child, so that after the death of the child. Now, technically, what she's done is she's written the whole of the book in the present tense. And I really would like to know what you as readers think about the present tense. Hilary Mantel has famously, and I think quite successfully, done it with Wolf Hall, but some people don't like it. They find it quite immediate. I can see why Maggie Farrell's done it, and she's used it very successfully because she was going back and forth between the past and the present, particularly in the first half of the novel. And by using the present tense, she doesn't have to use the more clunky past interior, so to speak. So I think that was very successfully done. However, I do wonder if the sense of busyness that I felt and you know, the over repetitiveness might have been aggravated by the fact that it was written in the present tense, so it was too close. But I'd love to know what you think, so do drop me a little comment underneath. Let me know if you like reading fiction in the present tense or you prefer the more traditional narrative. And if you're enjoying these kind of chats, please do give me a like or a subscribe. Last but not least, the conclusion. It was actually a mildly uplifting, shall we say, kind of cathartic conclusion, and I'm not going to offer any spoilers here. It left me mildly satisfied, but a little bit disappointed. The reason was, for me, the driver of the book and the most interesting character of the book was Agnes, the wife. She seemed to offer a connection between the Christian world and the pagan world. And what I was wanting to know, reading the book, was how this character of Agnes, who was so strong in the book, might have influenced the writing and the mind of her husband, William Shakespeare. And we didn't get any of that, and I felt let down by that in a way. But the novel is called Hamlet, so it was meant to be about the effect of the death of the child on the family and William. And she did do that, but I think she missed the more interesting conclusion, personally, for my part. So lastly, hats off to Maggie Farrell. It's a superbly imagined book and extremely well crafted. I think it's fantastic. I would read it, but with a caveat that perhaps if you are feeling vulnerable you might not want to read about the death of a child. So once again, thanks for listening. There'll be more of this, so please do give me a like and do give me a subscribe, and let me know what you think. See you soon.